And greetings. Welcome to Can Banks Make Money Out of Nothing? We're going to look into this deeply, and we're going to be looking at this from a book from a great, I hate to even use the word economist, but an erudite, scholarly man with a lot of experience in the monetary field to give us a glimpse at stuff that you probably never knew, probably should have never been told to know about, which we're about to learn right now. So let's get right down to it. Can banks individually create money out of nothing? The theories and the empirical evidence. And if you've been paying attention on the channel, we've been going over understanding evidence. So this will play into it rather well. So let's get down to it. We're not going to have to go through every single part of it, but I do want to focus on the essential parts here for us to get a grasp of this theory. So our abstract here, just to give us an oversight. This paper, let me center this on the screen a bit better. That's it. All right. Okay, here we go. This paper presents the first empirical evidence in the history of banking on the question of whether banks can create money out of nothing. The banking crisis has revived interest in this issue, but it has remained unsettled. Three hypotheses are recognized in the literature. According to the financial intermediation theory of banking, financial intermediation theory, banks are merely intermediaries, like other non-bank financial institutions, collecting deposits that are then lent out. According to the fractional reserve theory of banking, individual banks are mere financial intermediaries that cannot create money, but collectively, they end up creating money through systematic interaction. So think about the fractional reserve system of of taking deposits and being able to make them a fraction of the total amount that's able to be lent out. And that's through a systematic interaction with other banks too, right? It's a money system. And a third theory maintains that each individual bank has a power to create money out of nothing, and does so when it extends credit, the credit creation theory of banking. So we have three kinds here: the financial intermediation theory of banking, just collect deposits that are then lent out. So an intermediary just making fees, right? According to the fractional reserve, the individual banks are simply financial intermediaries that cannot create money, but collectively, as the fractional banking systems, right, end up creating money through their systemic interaction. And now we're going to focus on the third theory, which is the credit creation theory of banking. The question of which of the theories is correct has far-reaching implications for research and policy. Surprisingly, despite the long-standing controversy, until now no empirical study has tested the theories. This is the contribution of the present paper. An empirical test is conducted whereby money is borrowed from a cooperating bank while its internal records are being monitored to establish whether in the process of making the loan available to the borrower, the bank transfers these funds from other accounts within or outside the bank, or whether they are newly created. This study establishes for the first time empirically that banks individually create money out of nothing. The money supply is created as fairy dust, produced by the banks individually out of thin air. Let's take a quick break here to the chat. as we say, money is an equal exchange, a medium of exchange. Yeah, but now we're looking at theories of it to take it to another level of the distribution of this system of money. Let's continue on here. So from Wixel from 1922, the choice of a measure of value of a monetary system, of currency and credit legislation, all are in the hands of society, and natural conditions are relatively unimportant. So the choice of a measure of value of a monetary system, of currency and credit legislation, all in the hands of society, and natural conditions are relatively unimportant. Hence, then, the decision makers in society have the opportunity to directly demonstrate and test their economic wisdom or folly. History shows that the latter has often prevailed. So there it is. Let's look at this introduction here. Now, this is going to give us some practical history here. Of course, remember that we're focusing on here that this is empirical evidence that we're focusing on here as a study. This can actually be used to build an argument you may have in certain situations. But before we go any further, I just want to remind everyone that this is strictly to be used for the educational entertainment broadcast of this YouTube broadcast tonight, not to be used for anything financial, planning, personal, business, legal, lawful, tax-wise, or any other monetary interest other than for this educational entertainment purposes, and don't do this at home. Let's continue on here. Introduction. Since the American and European banking crisis of 2007 to 2008, the role of banks in the economy has increasingly attracted interest within the outside the disciplines of banking, finance, and economics. This interest is well justified. Thanks to the crisis, awareness has risen that the most widely used macroeconomic models and finance theories did not provide an adequate description of crucial features of our economies and financial systems, and, most notably, failed to include banks. So they're saying that the most widely used macroeconomic models and finance theories did not provide an adequate description of crucial features, and it just failed to include banks in general. These bankless dominant theories are likely to have influenced bank regulators and may thus have contributed to suboptimal bank regulation. So systemic issues emanating from the banking sector are impossible to detect in economic models that do not include banks, or in finance models that are based on individual, representative financial institutions without embedding these appropriately into macroeconomic models. So when some of these models don't make sense to you and they say, oh, you're just not smart enough, think about how smart this guy is. Mr. Werner here has, or Dr. Werner here has basically illustrated the fact that their models not only are missing crucial features of the economies, but most notably fail to include banks. And because of this, it's contributed to suboptimal bank regulation. They're flawed models. So whenever they're pushing and trying to sell these models, it causes you to think back to who is the smart ones here talking about the good models or not. So the excuses and the apologists that you hear a lot in the media aren't focusing on the empirical evidence, and that's what we're doing here tonight. So salute to all of you for being here. So it's saying here, systemic issues emanating from the banking sector are impossible to detect in economic models that do not include banks. So when you have systemic issues from the banking sector and the economic models do not include banks, or finance models that are based on individual representative financial institutions, without embedding them appropriately into macroeconomic models. So We go on here with the footnotes here, but this might get a little bit. I think the Basel approach to banking regulation focuses on regulation of capital adequacy. So Werner, this is our author here, has argued that this is based on economic theories that do not feature a special role for banks. For an overview and critique, see in the 2012 paper. But we're focusing on this paper of his right now. All right, let's continue on. So we're where we leave off before this. So the macroeconomic models being flawed, missing crucial features. Consequently, many researchers have since been directing their efforts at incorporating banks or banking sectors into economic models. This is a positive development, and the European Conference on Banking and the Economy, ECOBATE, oh gosh, they come up with some pretty good acronyms here, are contributing to this task, showcased in this second special issue on EcoBate 2013, held on 6th of March 2013 in Winchester Guildhall and organized by the University of Southampton Center for Banking, Finance, and Suitable Development. Okay. As the work in this area remains highly diverse, this article aims to contribute a better understanding of crucial features of banks, which would facilitate their suitable incorporation into economic models. So, researchers need to know which aspects of bank activity are essential, including important characteristics that may distinguish banks from non-bank financial institutions. Okay, guys, banks and non-banks both can be financial institutions. In other words, researchers need to know whether banks are unique in crucial aspects, and if so, why. So we get in some epistemological qualifications here if you're paying attention. In this paper, the question of their potential ability to create money is examined, which is a candidate for a central distinguishing feature. A review of the literature identifies three different, mutually exclusive views on the matter, each holding sway for about a third of the 20th century. The present conventional view is that banks are merely financial intermediaries that gather resources and reallocate them, just like other non-bank financial institutions, and without any special powers. Any differences between banks and non-bank financial institutions are seen as being due to a regulation and effectively so minimal that they are immaterial for modeling or for policymakers. So we're back to the evidence here, immaterial for modeling or for policymakers. Remember, we're working on an evidence-based study right here. Thus, it is thought to be permissible to model the economy without featuring banks directly. This view shall be called the financial intermediation theory of banking. It has been the dominant view since about the late 1960s. Between approximately the 1930s and the late 1960s, the dominant view was that the banking system is unique, since the banks, unlike other financial intermediaries, can collectively create money based on the fractional reserve or money multiplier model of banking. So this is from the 1930s, and you'll also see we had a review on the stream of the Federal Reserve Act of 1933, which set the stage for the Federal Reserve and the fractional reserve system of banking until the late 1960s. So let's continue on with our historical study here. So, since the banks, unlike other financial intermediaries, can collectively create money based on the fractional reserve or money multiplier model of banking. Despite their collective power, however, each individual bank is, in this view, considered to be a mere financial intermediary, gathering deposits and lending these out, without the ability to create money. This view shall be called the fractional reserve theory of banking. So we've gone through the financial intermediation theory, right? And this has been going on paper, let's see here. Yeah, since the 1960s. The late 1960s, we've been working with the financial intermediation theory of banking. Between the 30s and the 60s, we had the fractional reserve theory of banking. There is a third theory about the functioning of the banking sector with the ascendancy in the first 2 decades of the 20th century. Unlike the financial intermediation theory, and in line with the fractional reserve theory, it maintains that the banking system creates new money. So everything since 1933, the banking system creates the new money, the eligible papers. However, it goes further than the latter and differs from it in a number of respects. It argues that each individual bank is not a financial intermediary that passes on deposits or reserves from the central bank in its lending, but instead creates the entire loan amount out of nothing. This view shall be called the credit creation theory of banking. The three theories are based on a different description of how money and banking work, and they differ in their policy implications. Intriguingly, the controversy about which theory is correct has never been settled. As a result, the confusion reigns. Just a second here. I knew it. Okay, I should adjust the sound a little bit better here, guys. I just realized. Okay, there we go. So, as a result, the confusion reigns. Today, we find central banks, sometimes the very same central bank, supporting different theories. In the case of the Bank of England, central bank staff are on record supporting each one of the three mutually exclusive theories at the same time, as will be seen below. In matters of which of the theories is right, not only for understanding and modeling the role of banks correctly within the economy, but also for the design of appropriate bank regulation that aims at sustainable economic growth without crises. The modern approach to banking regulation, as implemented at least since Basel I, 1988, is predicted on the understanding that the financial intermediation theory is correct. Capital adequacy based bank regulation, even of the counter-cyclical type, is less likely to deliver financial stability if one or the other two banking hypotheses is correct. Capital adequacy-based approach to bank regulation adopted by the BCBS, as seen in Basel I and II, has so far not been successful in preventing major banking crises. As we've seen, if the financial intermediation theory is not an accurate description of reality, it would throw doubt on the sustainability of Basel III and similar national approaches to banking regulations, such as in the UK. It is thus of importance for research and policy to determine which of the three theories is an accurate description of reality. Empirical evidence can be used to test the relative merits of the theories. Surprisingly, no such test has so far been performed. This is the contribution of the present paper. And just to remind everyone that this is 2014. So the fact that this isn't front page news for everyone to know about should give pause. And at that moment, let me give a pause here and check up with the chat here. So yeah, oh boy, I didn't see all this chat coming over here. So yeah, there's no difference between investment or savings banks. They take your money and here's your interest earned. Well, what we're going to find out here is we get into this in detail in this paper. You're going to, if you all stick along here and try to stay with me, if it gets too much in the weeds, let me know in chat. I'm trying to just cover everything as quickly as possible to get to some of the meat here because there's some really enlightening things here. Auditing the model starts with having the objective evidence like this that we're going for. The audits are always based on objective evidence and fact finding, right? Fact based decision making and corrective actions based on what we're doing here is finding out the empirical evidence we could use. That way we could detect things that you couldn't normally see, as we're noticing here with flawed models. You don't get to detect where the problems are, and then the predictive ability of the models is gone, and then they usually fall apart and you have crises based on bad regulation. And it's hard to say them and us in that aspect because money has been there for everybody, so it's pretty much what's been agreed upon. uh, yeah, it's kind of strange here with some of that stuff. And see here, worldwide fusion centers. Everyone has an EDOS here. Yeah, transaction, medical, financial, and indeed is what one of the uh, aspects are of the systems too. That's one thing that we should be aware of. And people for profit is, well, without the people, what is there? If money's a medium of exchange, what's the exchange without the people? There's nothing there, and the medium is no value. And vendor vends venue on the yeah, exactly. And what was that oldie but goodie where the bank ran out of money but the people gave the money back? Christmas like story. I don't know about that one. They're making themselves rich out of thin air. Well, not just them, as we'll see here. uh, I believe we're going to find out here as we go down here whether credit unions, Bill Thomas, whether credit unions do count as banks. We're going to find out here. And the Great Depression era is something Stark 2 reality says here is something we might see sooner than we think again. And we're getting into some of that is that these models here, if they're tested and they can prove correct, you should be able to detect that before it happens. And that's what we're getting into here. So we're taking more of a fact-based approach than an opinionated approach. Um, Yeah, so the way you look at the way it's been abused, you'd say that. Clearly, these people know they're using flawed models, and I think that's what we're putting out here. So, in a way, this is the essence of auditing here. We're checking their policy against their process here, and not just verifying that they're doing it right, but are they doing the right thing? And that's a validation. So it's crazy. Yeah, it needs to be on the front page news. All right, banks are creating money out of nothing. This is crazy, but we're getting down to the details. Again, this is evidence based. This is fact based. This is stuff that could suffice as evidence for any kind of reporting or any other purposes because it meets that level of scrutiny and fact. Yeah, cause of crisis, break the working class, make the banks richer out of pixie dust. Yeah, let just don't be ignorant to it, and I think it's the best defense. And yeah, the reserve banks are rate risers who extort the people, and they say for the economy. And what we're going to find out here is more about those rates. It's going to blow your mind when we get to that part here. 2014 now 2024. Yeah, and what a difference since then. It seems like many people haven't heeded these warnings we're reading right here. And now maybe we'll see the reason why. And if they still don't want to heed these warnings, at least we could be empowered to see the facts of reality and what models are most matched to reality for making more effective decisions. And again, we have here production, manufacturing, distribution, research, and development costs. That's where the money should be going. Destroy the system to save the system they created. It's happening. Well, that's the problem when you have the wrong people running the show like that. It's terrible. That's why you're always preparing, talk about hoarding goods in commerce. And yeah, it's always, and it's a twofold thing, minimalist and also, having good backup plans. As the old saying go, 2 is 1 and 1 is none. Redundancy is close to godliness. So let's see here. Yeah, absolutely. I know about limited resources and overpopulation. That, I think, is more of a myth than anything. Yep, preparing is always good. Majority of the people are dependent on Walmart's. The more control, centralized control. It's not just control, but the centralized, because control could be fragmented easily and lost. So centralized control and having that interdependence to maintain it is another key. All right, let's get back to this and continue down here. So the remainder of the paper is structured as follows. Section 2 provides an overview of relevant literature differentiating authors and adherence to one of the three banking theories. It will be seen that the leading economists have gone on record in support of each one of the theories. In Section 3, I then present an empirical test that is able to settle the question of whether banks are unique and whether they can individually create money out of nothing. It involves the actual processing of a live bank loan taken out by the researcher from a representative bank that cooperates in the monitoring of its internal records and operations, allowing access to its documentation and accounting systems. The results and some implications are discussed in Section 4. Friends, that's called an audit. Let's continue. 2. The literature on whether banks can create money. Much has been written on the role of banks in the economy in the past century and beyond. Often authors have been concerned with the question of whether banks can create money, as they often simply assume their preferred theory to be true without discussing it directly, let alone in a comparative fashion. This literature review is restricted to authors that have contributed directly and explicitly to the question of whether banks can create credit and money. During time periods when the author's country's banks issued promissory notes, those are banknotes, that circulated as paper money, writers would often, as a matter of course, mention, even if only in passing, that the banks create or issue money. In England and Wales, the Bank Charter Act of 1844 forbade banks to make any engagement for the payment of money payable to bearer on demand. This ended banknote issuance for most banks in England and Wales, leaving the until 1946 officially privately owned Bank of England, with a monopoly on banknote issuance. Till 1946. Meanwhile, the practice continued in the United States until the 20th century and was expanded with the similarly timed New York Free Banking Act of 1838, so that U.S. authors would refer to banknote issuance as evidence of the money creation. We're not going to look at all this stuff here. Let's see at the bank creators. If banks are creators of the money supply, and this is a unique rule, if this rule is unique and different from non-bank financial intermediaries, as the other two hypotheses maintain, then a reduction in bank credit creation must have effects that non-bank intermediaries cannot compensate for. So a distinction. Interesting. See how they're measuring everything here. Let's see here. Credit crunches affecting the real economy. It would in fact be strange if fixed minimum capital requirements did not bite in some periods, thereby constraining the banks, given that the purpose of bank capital requirements is to limit the amount of risk that can be taken relative to capital. However, for this to have an effect on output, it would have to be true that any shortfall in banking lending was not fully made up through lending by other intermediaries. So it seems like they're just trying to give the facts that the math doesn't quite add up for some of these models. And though they sound good, and by overly complicating them, as we're reading through here, that they're just not really well explained to the lay person. And I think it's the most erudite also don't buy it. So let's continue. So for the sake of clarity, our main interest in this paper is a question whether banks that do not issue banknotes are able to create money and credit out of nothing. So banknotes, as a result, earlier authors writing mainly about paper money issuance are only mentioned in passing here, even if it could be said that the arguments might also apply to banks that do not issue banknotes. These include these guys. Adam Smith, okay, among others, who are directly or indirectly state that banks can individually create credit. Directly or indirectly state that the banks can individually create credit in line with the credit creation theory, going all the way back to John Law in 1705. Consider that. So this is a theory that goes back rather far. The credit creation theory of banking. Okay, so this is where we want to pay attention and follow this theory here, because this is the theory that they don't want to teach anyone, but it seems like the theory that is closest to being applied to getting predictions of reality and explaining what's going on. Influential early writers that argue that non-issuing banks have the power to individually create money and credit out of nothing wrote mainly in English or German, namely Wixell, Withers. Oh shoot! Oh no, I just went to the. What did I do? I went to the reference there. Sorry about that, guys. Well, that's a good time for us to jump over here to chat. Wow. That took us right to the end of it, didn't it? There we go. All right. But good time to check into the chat here. All right. Start two. Well, thanks for coming. I'll try to keep this up as long as I can. And we can't say it's going to stay up forever, though, because this is kind of touchy material here. Yeah, this is next level auditing here. This is beyond what I've seen anyone do. That's why I really want to share this with everyone here, because this is something that goes beyond even the experts. Financial time space could be curved in on itself, turning taxes into profits. Well, we're not too far from that one. Yep. Good night and goodbye. We'll see you, and hopefully you'll be able to see the rest of this. I'll keep it up for some time. Indeed, the Templars. Tenders also traded the product. And yeah, our Bank of England is owned by the Crown, of course. And of course, they're talking the City of London there too. See value, Metal says he sees value in gold. Well, that goes with the name, right? Diamonds and tangible goods. I don't see value in paper. This is why. The models are all messed up, and only a few people are genius enough to audit them, like this doctor here. Well, thanks. This is, I appreciate, I'm just doing a little bit of reading that anyone can do. I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't something anyone can do. Well, we know they're all doing quasi things. You don't need to be Esquire. I'm not Esquire. I wouldn't say that at all. Promissory notes, they're not just promissory notes. These are bank notes, and that makes a specific kind. And we'll see later why that matters. And Deb says yes. All right, and let's see here. Thing is, can't eat metal rocks. Even had a story on Joe's. Yeah, but the metals can be used to make a plow and stuff to be able to farm a lot more land than you normally could, and then you could have stores in case there's a famine. So there's a lot of elements to metal and the metallurgy which do translate into survival from food. And all national debt comes from allowing international bankers to print our money. They charge us for every note they print. That's how trillions of national debt. Yeah, I mean, that's one way. There's a multitude, as we're going to see, ways that are unnecessary but enrich many, many people here. Much gratitude for you all being here, and salute to you all for spending the time to go here and delve deep into this. But let's get right back to it. We're into the credit creation theory of banking. All right, so what we saw here mostly in German or English, and the review of proponents of the credit creation theory must start with Henry Dunning MacLeod of Trinity College, Cambridge, of course, and barrister at law at the Inner Temple. MacLeod produced an influential opus on banking entitled The Theory and Practice of Banking in 2 volumes. It was published in numerous editions well into the 20th century. The quotes here are from the 6th edition of 1905. Concerning credit creation by individual banks, MacLeod unequivocally argued that individual banks create credit and money out of nothing, whenever they do what is called lending. Let me read this one more time. He unequivocally argued that individual banks create credit and money out of nothing, whenever they do what is called lending. In modern times, private bankers discontinued issuing notes and merely created credits in their customers' favor to be drawn against by checks. These credits are, in banking language, termed deposits. Now, many persons seeing a material bank note, which is only a right recorded on paper, are willing to admit that a banknote is cash. But from the want of a little reflection, they feel a difficulty with regard to what they see as deposits. They admit that a banknote is an issue and currency, but they fail to see that a bank credit is exactly the same sense, equally an issue, currency, and circulation. You see this? Only a right recorded on paper. So let me read this again. This is a long sentence. Boy, they liked to write long sentences back then. In modern times, private bankers discontinued issuing notes and merely created credits in their customers' favor to be drawn against by checks. The credits are, in banking language, termed deposits. So in banking language, credits are deposits. Now, many persons seeing a material banknote, which is only a right recorded on paper. A banknote is only a right recorded on paper. Those guys are willing to admit that a banknote is cash, but from the want of a little reflection, they feel a difficulty with regard to what they see as deposits. So the deposits in that paper on record right are the same. They admit that a banknote is an issue in currency, but they fail to see that a bank credit is exactly in the same sense, equally an issue, currency, and circulation. So what he's trying to say is that the banknote is no different than the deposit, which is no different than a credit. These are all capitalized. Wow. So Robert Peel was quite mistaken. Now 1905, so this is, nothing that's new. Sir Robert Peel was quite mistaken in supposing that bankers only make advances out of bona fide capital. This is so fully set forth in the chapter on the theory of banking that we need only to remind our readers that all banking advances are made in the first instance, by creating credit. And that was their original emphasis. 1891 in his theory of credit. This is MacLeod, the one that we said this is the first one that everyone needs to read about. A bank is therefore not an office for borrowing and lending money, but is a manufacturer of credit. 1891. According to the credit creation theory, then, banks create credit in the form of what bankers call deposits. And this credit is money. But how much credit can they create? Wiskel, 1907, described a credit-based economy in the Economic Journal, arguing that the banks in their lending business are not only limited by their own capital, they are not, at least not immediately, limited by any capital whatever, but concentrating in their hands almost all payments. They themselves create the money required. In a pure system of credit, where all payments are made by transference in the bank books, listen to this, the banks, here you go with interest rates, the banks would be able to grant at any moment any amount of loans at any, however diminutive, rate of interest. Let's get this again. In a pure system of credit, where all payments were made by transference in the bank books and the ledgers, the banks would be able to grant at any moment any amount of loans at any rate of interest, no matter how diminutive, no matter how small, 0.00001% interest, at any time, any amount. Withers, 1909. From 1916 to 1921, the editor of The Economist also saw few restraints on the amount of money banks could create out of nothing. It is a common, popular mistake when one is told that the banks of the United Kingdom hold over 900 millions of deposits. And I know hold over 900 millions, it doesn't say millions of what? Millions of what? Deposits. It's deposits. To open one's eyes in astonishment at the thought of this huge amount of cash that has been saved by the community as a whole and stored by them in the hands of their bankers, and to regard it as a tremendous evidence of wealth. But this is not quite the true view of the case. Most of the money that is stored by the community in the bank consists of bookkeeping credits lent to it by its bankers. The greatest part of the banker's deposits is thus seen to consist not of cash paid in, but of credits borrowed. For every loan makes a deposit. Every loan makes a deposit, which is credit. The loan makes the credit. When notes were the currency of commerce, a bank which made an advance or discontinued a bill gave its customer its own notes as the proceeds of the operation and created a liability for itself. Now, a bank makes an advance or discounts a bill and makes a liability for itself in the corresponding credit in its books. Makes a liability for itself in the corresponding credit in its books. So, some pretty heavy stuff here. And on the footnotes we saw here, oh gosh, too much in German. I don't read German well. The practice of issuance of promissory notes by commercial banks has continued for far longer in Scotland and Northern Ireland, namely until today. This did not seem, however, to result in a sizable literature on bank money creation in the UK throughout the 20th century. Banks and customers apply for money, generally advance them through their own promissory notes. So we're just the references what we just spoke about. Let's get to the chat here. Okay, so we had some pretty strong stuff we just went through here, so I have to catch up here with the chat a bit. Give me 1 second here so I can see the screen here. Cave or condo, food, water, shelter. Yeah, that's a good, depending on what your needs are, right, at the times. I definitely learn more with the group because there's questions asked, and what I've oftentimes found is experiences offered. Called lending, and as you see here, and what Dr. Werner also gets into here, is the fact that they don't do lending. You'll see what they do. They purchase securities, and you're seeing this here that the lending creates a deposit, the loan, I should say. Switzerland, yeah, Switzerland, and good chocolate too. Yeah, they lend us our own money. We pay them back to create more wealth for themselves. Yeah, where's the money come from? We're all broke, so we take a loan out. We had no money. Yeah, it's you're starting to see where some of the nonsense comes in. When you put money in the bank, you are lending them money. Actually, they're purchasing securities from you. You'll quite soon see, but I don't want to give it away yet. And they use it to make more money. Well, yeah, that's going to be part of the formula as well. The way this works, and it's insane, but people for profit. Uh, yeah, we can't charge them interest, but we can definitely get other ways of getting credit, right? And a Ponzi scheme, no, not so simple, or a pyramid, but it is a scheme nonetheless of a certain type. But again, we're trying to stick with a factual approach here of being able to see what's going on. The monumental fraud, to me, it seems, are these flawed models that we've been sold and told that they're the way to run and regulate the banking system, and trying to keep the truth from us, which we're going over right here. That's been around since the beginning of the 20th century in the mainstream, at least in academia and economics. They knew about this stuff. Uh, so that's the fraud, is keeping us away from the mainstream today and running with these flawed models where they know where it's going to end. And this is where it ends. Depression, exactly. And you're seeing the same thing where things become consolidated and the small ones are always pushed away. It sounds like government out of control, but essentially they're elements to the fractional reserve type system and that intermediary system as well. And that came from times of kings and such, and hoarders holding all the money. So there's other robber barons and things like that you have issues. Yeah, they say all wars are bankers' wars as well. There, try out new toys and attrition. Yeah, absolutely. So let's see here. Pay up. Yeah, so Meta Metal says that it's insane. They loan out $100 at whatever interest they could want to do. Yeah, imagine doing that forever, and you're talking insane wealth. Oh no, $100 at 10% interest, 29% interest. I mean, ridiculous interest. That's just what they might do to their friends if they even want to. And so when you really look at it, the interest is almost like it's like almost like a joke. It's almost totally arbitrary, just to like I don't know, like picking a color of the day. A Villa Village, yeah, it was called the Villain. Pay up or immediate eviction. The Villain, yeah. Run by the people for the people. I think the biggest part is really just people understanding the elements of credit, because what you're seeing here isn't on the starting end of it, and we'll get into more of that here. Don't comply with FOIA laws. Yeah. Yeah, they get around it by using flawed models, or not valid models, it seems. And what we're doing here is taking an evidence-based approach, an empirical approach, to validate the credit-based model that is a better explanatory way of dealing with regulation rather than the guesswork of some of the other systems here. George Bailey explained the theory of banking very well when he faced a bank run on his old savings and loan. I'll have to look into that one too. Yeah, in this day and age, when you really consider the amount of time we have and the resources available and things like YouTube and there's no excuse why people shouldn't have all this knowledge. Really, this is empirical knowledge we're getting down to right here with money and financing. You don't need an economist degree or a mathematics degree to understand what we're discussing here tonight. So again, salute to you all for being here. All right, and I think we're caught up with the chat. Now we can continue. Oh, blank endorsement. That's a whole nother issue here. That wouldn't be these promissory notes. That's down to your drafts. Again, what you see here is in the FOIA is just a fractal representation of what you see through all levels of government and regulation and any kind of instruments that are in trust, such as finances, records, etc. Um, it's not just a duty of each and every one of us, but the diligence is really part of the price, and paying attention is another way we pay the price of maintaining our liberties. So again, it's down to perceptions based on what the validation, the epistemology of the knowledge we're learning. And this is where we're trying to get down to a more empirical approach to what, if we're going to go with a theory to try and make determinations, well, then it should be based on as close to a model of reality as we can get. And that's what we're working on right here. So let's continue. So, according to the credit creation theory, then, banks create credit in the form of what bankers call deposits. And this credit is money. How much credit can they create? So, again, we went through this part here. Where were we? Oh, we were looking through the footnotes. Okay, well, that was a good summing up of the whole section there. We had all the references and examples and quotes, and we're still down to more of them here. It comes to this, that whenever a bank makes an advance or buys a security, notice here we're back to what we were talking about here. Whenever a bank makes an advance, you know what the advance is? We went over that in one of the UCC streams I did, where the advance is the amount that's given. There's also the payoff amount, which would be the advance plus the financing fees and accrued interest, etc. The advance is the actual amount of credit created for the transaction. So when a bank makes an advance or buys a security, what is buying a security? Like purchasing a promissory note. It gives someone the right to draw a check upon it. Well, no, that wouldn't be a security, would it? Promissory note wouldn't be a security. So what are they buying here? It gives someone the right to draw a check upon it, which check will be paid in either to it or some other banks. And so the volume of banking deposits as a whole will be increased, and the cash resources of the banks as a whole will be unaltered. One more time, it comes to this. Whenever a bank makes an advance or buys a security, it gives someone the right to draw a check upon it, which check will be paid either to it or to some other banks. And so that person that draws upon it can be paid to them or some other bank, so that the volume of banking deposits as a whole will be increased, and the cash resources of the bank as a whole will be unaltered, because it can only be cashed out once if it doesn't stay into some other banks. So that's an interesting way to look at the math behind it there. As a whole, the cash resources will be unaltered, but the banking deposits will be increased. Try to digest that one there. That's from Withers. When once this fact is recognized, that the banks are still, among other things, manufacturers of currency, just as much as they were in the days when they issued notes. We see how important a function the banks exercise in the economic world, because it is now generally admitted that the volume of currency created has a direct and important effect upon prices. This arises from what is called quantity theory of money. If then the quantity theory is, as I believe, broadly true, we see how great is the responsibility of bankers as manufacturers of currency, seeing that, by their action, they affect not only the convenience of their customers and the profits of their shareholders, directly, but the general level of prices, inflation. If banks create currency faster than the rate at which goods are being produced, their action will cause a rise in prices, which will have a perhaps disastrous effect. That's from Withers, 1916. Does this sound familiar? If banks create currency faster than at which a rate goods are being produced, this action will cause a rise in prices, which will have a perhaps disastrous effect. And so it becomes evident, as before stated, that the deposits of the banks, which give the commercial community the right to draw checks, are chiefly created by the action of the banks themselves in lending, discounting, and investing. So it's chiefly created by their actions, the commercial community, right? The deposits of the banks, which give the commercial community the right to draw the checks. Wow, then it thus appears that credit is the machinery by which a very important part of modern currency is created. Please, then it thus appears that credit is the machinery by which a very important part of modern currency is created. Wither argues that the sovereign prerogative to manufacture the currency of the nation has effectively, been privatized and granted to the commercial banks. Hang on a second here. Let me just double check something here real quick. Okay, yep, we're still here with the chat. Good. Okay, let me bring up the chat here for just a moment here. Catch up here because we're moving pretty fast. Yeah, these, you need a portfolio professional to call on, yep. Yeah, it's very available. All the knowledge is available. It's all available. Spend what you don't have. No loans, no borrowing. Yeah, but that's what they teach you. But that's, as we're learning here, it's not quite what money is. Now, living beyond your means is a danger. Remember, the deposits had to be in line with what's being produced to be more a producer, not just a consumer. And that's the purpose of having that credit available. And they hide behind these quasi models because, they don't want to play their part. They're supposed to be making it available for the people. That's their duty. So that's what don't spend what you don't have. And credit cards and that kind of credit is not quite exactly what we're talking about here. It's a lot larger scale than that. This is more when you talk about larger investment purchases, land, things like that. So the modern conveniences are not necessarily the big part of it, but of course, the ones that want to exploit those in large volume, right? What you call it, the trivial many, ends up becoming hard to detect. Everyone pays attention to the the prominent few, the significant few that stand out. The trivial many, when you talk about the many, many people spending, strange amounts of money that they shouldn't, that adds up. And you have your Milford saying the wages and salaries used to be paid in cash. Yeah, now the go straight in the bank and they charge you and the vendor every time they use it to pay. And of course, the banks, it's win-win for them because they are the ones charged with creating the money. Yeah, you should be able to get the credit for that because with that sewing machine, you're going to make more than what measly interest rate do they have to charge you for it, right? If you're putting that thing to the work for the economy and you're going to start moving money and making deposits now into their account because you're making profit with that sewing machine, what more do they need? And that's kind of what we're moving towards here. It's not necessarily about convenience, but about keeping the activity moving. The shareholders, the Rothschilds, of course, we know that. Saying you can create a contract to pay money at a future time, this way create virtual money. Well, that's the thing. It's the intent of it. Cashless businesses, yeah, indeed, could be a trouble, but it's only because of the lax record keeping it ends up becoming an artifact of that. And whose convenience exactly? I've never minded counting change, anyways. That being said, yeah, they did. Yeah, that's well, trust me, this thing was well thought out by the Pope and the Romans a long, long time ago. Yeah, indeed. Appeal for profit. What's one's values? Well, that's the other thing here. Yeah, consume. Well, that's the thing. The more people consume, the more control they're going to have because they're not producers. And this is where the national debt comes from, indeed. But that national debt is, again, it's a misrepresentation. It's not like the money sitting there, like we saw in the introduction about 900 trillion or million sitting in the Bank of England. It's not quite that. Yeah, that comes down to intellectual capital. If you've got a brand that can increase profit margin by that much, that didn't come out of thin air. So if you're able to build a brand that can make that kind of jump in profit, then there's nothing wrong with it, I guess. But look what the banks do. When they make that kind of thing, but they don't come up with a brand, marketing, design, superior product, or anything like that. So there's a lot to consider about the intent of this money being created, why it's being done. It's not being done just for the bankers and the shareholders. So Withers argues that the sovereign prerogative to manufacture the currency of the nation has effectively been privatized and granted to the commercial banks. By this interesting development, the manufacture of currency, which for centuries has been in the hands of government, has now passed, in regard to a very important part of it, into the hands of companies working for the convenience of their customers and the profits of their shareholders, Rothschilds. While Withers was a financial journalist, his writings had a high circulation and likely contributed to the dissemination of the credit creation theory in the form proposed by McLeod. This view also caught on in Germany with the publication of Schumpeter's 1912, English 1934, influential book, The Theory of Economic Development. Wow. In which he was unequivocal in his view that each individual bank has the power to create money out of nothing They like this theme that each individual bank has the power to create money out of nothing. Something like a certificate of future output or the award of purchasing power on the basis of promises of the entrepreneur actually exists, as we were just speaking about in chat. That is the service that the banker performs for the entrepreneur. And to obtain which the entrepreneur approaches the banker would not be an intermediary, but a manufacturer of credit. An example, he would create himself the purchasing power that he lends to the entrepreneur. One could say, without committing a major sin, that the banker creates money. Wow. And that's from Shumter, 1912. Credit is essentially the creation of purchasing power for the purpose of transferring it to the entrepreneur. Credit is essentially the creation of purchasing power for the purpose of transferring it to the entrepreneur, but not simply the transfer of existing purchasing power by credit. Entrepreneurs are given access to the social stream of goods before they have acquired the normal claim to it. And this function constitutes the keystone of the modern credit structure. So that comes down to like working capital. The fictitious certification of products, which, as it were, the credit means of payment originally represented, has become truth. Wow, the fictitious certification of products, which, as it were, the credit means of payment originally represented, has become truth. This view was also well represented across the Atlantic, as writings of Davenport or Robert H. Howe indicate. Hawthorne, 1919, another leading British economist who, like Keynes, had a treasury background and moved into academia, took a clear stance in favor of the credit creation theory. For the manufacturers and others who have to pay money out, credits are still created by the exchange of obligations. The banker's immediate obligation being given to his customer in exchange for the customer's obligation to repay at a future date. So you would think this is a promissory note, but it's not. Let's look at this again. Manufacturers of money, they pay the money out. The credits are still created by the exchange of obligations. Pay attention, are created by the exchange of obligations. Money is a medium of exchange. The credits created by the exchange of obligations. The banker's immediate obligation being given to his customer in exchange for the customer's obligation to repay at a future date. We shall still describe this dual operation as the creation of credit. By its means, the banker creates the means of payment out of nothing, whereas when he receives a bag of money from his customer, one means of payment, a bank credit, is merely substituted for another, an equal amount of cash. Apart from Shumter, a number of other German language authors also argued that the banks create money and credit individually through the process of lending. Highly influential in both academic discourse and public debate was Albert L. Hahn, 1920, a scion of Frankfurt banking dynasty similar to Thornton, who had been a banker, and since 1919 director of the major family-owned Effekten und Wischel Bank Frankfurt. Like McLeod, a trained lawyer, he became an honorary professor at the Goethe University, whatever. I'm not going to read this German stuff here. Our author here is German, Werner, Richard Werner. Okay, clearly not aware of the works of McLeod, whom he cites, but also aware of the actual banking practice from his family's business, Hahn argued the banks do indeed create money out of nothing. They all kind of like this, create money out of nothing. The title of our stream tonight. Every credit that is extended in the economy creates a deposit, and thus the means to fund it. The conclusion from the process described can be expressed in reverse by saying that every deposit that exists somewhere and somehow in the economy has come about by a prior extension of credit. Every deposit has come about by a prior extension of credit. So that's all the money starts from that. All the deposits came from a prior extension of credit. We thus maintain, contrary to the entire literature on banking and credit, okay, remember we're back to the empirical evidence-based view here, that the primary business of banks is not the liability of business, especially the deposit business, but that in general, and in each and every case, an asset transaction of a bank must have previously taken place in order to allow the possibility of a liability business and to cause it. The liability business of banks is nothing but a reflex of prior credit extension. The opposite view is based on a kind of optical illusion. Overall, Hahn probably did more than anyone to popularize the credit creation theory in Germany, his book becoming a bestseller and spawning much controversy and new research among economists in Germany. It also greatly heightened the awareness among journalists. The broad impact of the book was Sumter cited it was positively, so he's a good writer. Support for the credit creation appeared widespread, dubbed by the current view the traditional theory and time-worn theory of bank credit by later critics. Early Keynes said to have been a supporter of this dominant view. His tract on monetary reform, Keynes, he asserts, apparently without the feeling need to establish this further, that banks create credit and money at least in aggregate. So this from Keynes here, I guess 1924. The internal price level is mainly determined by the amount of credit created by the banks, chiefly the big five. Internal price level. Okay, so I think we get a lot of citations here. I'm kind of I'm with Mr. Dr. Werner on this here, and let's get to his conclusions here. We know about the fractional reserve theory, but again, we get into the details here. He's got to rip it apart empirically. So let's continue down here. Okay, so here we go. Here's a textbook representation of money multiplication. Bank A, 1% reserve, loanable funds, $99. Okay, you get it right. So the fractional reserve, that's how it's presented in many books, right? And I'm sure that we're going to get into some very good critique in here, but as we're getting towards the end of the tolerance here, I think for attention, we need to get to the conclusion. And we're almost there. Let me zoom out a little bit so I don't miss it. So you can see the whole document in one view. There we go. So as you can see, a lot of extension, and here's our empirical test. So now we get down to the good stuff here. Conclusion of the literature review. I think we can pretty much say that he did good job research. I'd give him an A. Okay. And let's get to the chat before we go any further here. All right. Yeah. Well, thanks for sticking around this long, Deb Anderson. Definitely enjoy what you get out of this, and hopefully you'll be able to finish up the rest before. Hopefully we'll be able to keep it up. Yeah, banks have a different way of advertising. Yeah, it's just not, there's no, yeah, we've been off a metallic system for a very long time. Nah, you ain't gonna make lead out of gold. Or gold and lead. Uh, thought by nut jobs or marketing specialists, maybe not necessarily nut jobs. How to separate one from their money, always another hoop to jump farther and farther away. Yeah, well, it's progressively worse and worse, is how it gets, doesn't it? They get people buried into a hole. Robber barons, speculators, amblers. Yeah, yeah, that's, you could say that. Gamblers, amblers, gamblers. Yeah, but that's another game. They all there's always the limits of liability and those kinds of things they like to focus on. Anyways, we're on to the empirical test here. I want to really get to the end of this because this has been a long stream. The simplest possible test design is to examine a bank's internal accounting during the process of granting a bank loan. When all the necessary bank credit procedures have been undertaken, starting with know your customer and anti-money laundering regulations, credit analysis, risk rating, and negotiation of the details of the loan contract, and signatures are exchanged on the bank loan, the borrower's current account will be credited with the amount of the loan. The key question is whether a prerequisite of this accounting operation of the booking of the borrower's loan principal into their bank account and the bank actually withdraws this amount from another account, resulting in a reduction of equal value in the balance of another entity, either drawing down reserves, as a fractional reserve theory maintains, or other funds, as a financial intermediation theory maintains. Should it be found that the bank is able to credit the borrower's account with the loan principal without having withdrawn money from any other internal or external account, or without transferring the money from any other source internally or externally, this would constitute prima facie evidence that the bank was able to create the loan principal out of nothing. So where's the collateral? In that case, the credit creation theory would be supported, and the theory that the individual bank acts as an intermediary that needs to obtain savings or funds first before being able to extend credit, whether in conformity with the fractional reserve theory or the financial intermediation theory, would be rejected. Expected results. With a bank loan of 200,000 euros drawn by the researcher from a bank, the following changes in the bank's accounting entries are expected. A priori account according to each theory. So remember, he has access to their books behind the scenes as an auditor. Bank credit accounting according to the credit creation theory. According to this theory, banks behave very differently from financial intermediaries such as stockbrokers since they do not separate customer funds from own funds. Money deposited with the bank becomes the legal property of the bank, and the depositor is actually a lender to the bank, ranking among the general creditors. Oh, geez. When extending the bank credit, banks create an imaginary deposit by recording the loan amount in the borrower's account. Although no new deposit has taken place, credit creation out of nothing. Balance sheet lengthens. Cash, central reserve, bank reserves, or balances with other banks are not immediately needed, as reserve and capital requirements only need to be met at particular measurement intervals, times when they measure it. The account changes are shown in Table 1. B. Bank credit accounting according to fractional reserve theory. Distinguishing feature of this theory is that each individual bank cannot create credit out of nothing. The bank is a financial intermediary and distinguishable from other financial intermediaries and stockbrokers and security firms. However, the banks are said to be different in one respect, namely the regulatory treatment. Regulators have placed onerous rules concerning reserves that have to be held with the central bank only on banks, not other financial intermediaries. Bank can only lend money when it has previously received the same amount in excess reserves from another bank whose own reserve balances will have declined, or from the central bank. So, yeah, we want to see a balance sheet of that moving. Bank will not lend more than its excess reserves. By law, it must hold a certain amount. Okay. So we should be able to see it on the balance sheet there. Bank credit scoring. So let me zoom out here again. I don't want to bore you guys with too much of the data here. We just have to kind of trust that Dr. Werner here did a good job. And we get down to our results. I'm not going to look at this because this gets into statistics and a lot of stuff where we're not going to be able to stick with it. Let's just see what his findings were here, his conclusion. There we are. Okay, now is the part I want to get to, everyone. Boy, thank you all for sticking around this far and make it this far. This paper was intended to serve two functions. First, the history of economic thought was examined. We sure did, concerning the question of how banks function. It was found that a long-standing controversy exists that has not been settled empirically. Secondly, empirical tests were conducted to settle the existing and continuing controversies and find out which of the three theories of banking is consistent with the empirical observations. Who would think a scientific approach to banking? Three theories, but no empirical tests. Concerning the first issue in this paper, we identified the hypotheses. Yeah, okay, we got that. The empirical evidence, credit creation theory, supported. The second contribution has been to report on the first empirical study testing the three main hypotheses. These have been successfully tested in a real-world setting. Good, they did, with borrowing from a bank. Here's how he did it, so don't think it's just someone saying he did it. And examining, as you see here, all this nice statistical stuff here, the delta assets and all that. Examine the actual internal bank accounting in an uncontrolled real-world environment. It was examined whether, in the process of making money available to the borrower, the bank transfers these funds from other accounts within or outside the bank. In the process of making loaned money available in the borrower's bank account, it was found, drumroll please, that the bank did not transfer the money away from other internal or external accounts, resulting in a rejection of both the fractional reserve theory and the financial intermediation theory. Instead, it was found that the bank newly invented the funds by crediting the borrower's account with a deposit, although no such deposit had taken place. This is in line with the claims of the credit creation theory. So, instead, it was found that the bank newly invented the funds by crediting the borrower's account with a deposit, although no such deposit had taken place. So they credit an account with a deposit that hadn't taken place. This is in line with the claims of the credit creation theory. Well, thus, it can now be said with confidence, for the first time, possibly in the 5,000 years history of banking. Tonight, guys, we salute to you all for being here after 5,000 years. That it has been empirically demonstrated that each individual bank creates credit and money out of nothing when it extends what is called a, quote, bank loan. The bank does not loan any existing money, but instead creates new money. The money supply is created as, quote, fairy dust, produced by the banks out of thin air, not thick air, out of thin air. The implications are far-reaching. So what's special about banks? Well, we're not economists, so we don't need to worry about this, because they can individually create money out of nothing, solving a long-standing puzzle. Implications for economic theory, we can only know scientific knowledge in economics. Now we have more than most of the economics you'll hear from on the lamestream media. Dismisses supporters of credit creation army here. Cranks. These are extraordinary. Seem to believe massive utopia. So Keynes isn't a big fan of this. Needless to mention, such rhetoric is not conducive to scientific argument. But this technique was followed by other economists engaged in advancing the fractional reserve and later financial intermediation theories. U.S. Federal Reserve staffer Aladef in 1954 argued similarly during the era when economists worked on getting fractional reserve theory established. So they knew about this stuff. And it gives you a lower opinion of Keynes and some of these other ones with their derogatory treatment of supporters of the credit creation theory, which we have now shown with empirical evidence is the valid theory. Bank credit means working capital. We're just talking about this. For the individual trader, okay, this is important. So let's read this. This is actually pretty good. Who's this from? Volume something 33. Footnote 33. Goodness. Well, here it is. So this is from Keynes. Wait a second here. What does it say here? Oh, okay. Let's see here. Okay, so Keynes changed his tune. I get it. 6 years later. So that's what I get for not reading the whole thing. Trying to get through this thing here fast for everyone here. There's a common element in theories nearly all money heretics. The theories of money and credit are alike in supposing that in some way banks can furnish all. Okay, yeah, so it is. Yeah, so that's his complaint there. I see that's not a good one there. So you got monetary reform. Dear Professor Dr. Werner, confirmation of facts. Okay, here we go. This is the letter of confirmation of facts. Original translation. So, confirmation of facts. Here we go. In connection with the extension of credit to you in August 2014, I am pleased to confirm that neither I, as director of nor our staff checked either before or during the granting of the loan to you whether we keep sufficient funds with our central bank, DZ Bank AG, or the Bundesbank. We also did not engage in any such related transaction, nor did we undertake any transfers or account bookings in order to finance the credit balance in your account. Therefore, we did not engage in any checks or transactions in order to provide liquidity. Sincerely, Mr. Rebel, Director Reifensen Bank, Wildenberg, and DG. Interesting. So we got the appendix, and that is it. Wow. So this is a sequence of the steps. Let's look at this one here, and then we're done with the whole thing. So, negotiations concerning the details of the loan, receipt of the KYC information, opening of new customer file, opening of a current account, new customer, calculation of the loan and repayment schedule, model calculation, European required customer notification information, record of customer advisory. We have like the Truth in Lending Act statement, things like that in the United States of America. Entry of loan application into the bank IT system, check of availability of service to repay the loan, conducting liquidity calculation and loan application, the credit rating and customer entry into customer file, search of customer data on central bank database for singular economic dependencies and entry results into bank IT, bank board recommendation on loan application, justification takes 2 directors. Wow. Justification, printout of loan contract, general loan conditions with handover receipt by customer, print out protocol of loan process, approval credit by bank directors by signing the protocol and loan contract, creation loan account in the IT system, establishing a credit limit and availability of credit, appointment with customer, customer signs credit documents, payment of loan at value date, in exchange for evidence of use of the loan in line with the declared use in the loan application. You see this here, number 17. Payment of loan at value date in exchange, medium of exchange, for evidence of use. That's your notes, some kind of contract or something of use of the loan in line with the declared use in the loan application. So the exchange for evidence, what evidence is that? I think that's it. And we have reached the end of our document. Thank you all for being here. I think it has been a very enlightening journey. Let's just double check here with the chat, make sure we've looked at everything in here. Oh, brother, yeah, is the banker your relation business partner? Yeah, they're your partner. Seems creditors are your partner. Imaginary deposit? No, it's a real deposit. It was just created out of pixie dust. It's make believe, or we will make. Well, considering that a lot of people do believe, it makes it hard to go against the grain, huh? Well, paper certified, of course, and electronic transfer. Everything has to be put into their IT system. Notice paperless accounting, e-transaction. Oops, the computer blew up. Yeah, but they have. Trust me. I mean, libraries burn. There's always provisions for that. Uh, like those public official servants that will get the cops to make you cooperate. Yeah, they have ways of doing that. So we could get into that. The monetary mafia, um, in a way, fiat, in a way. See, two cups says here. Your note is a deposit of new funds from the note. The note is used to trade on to fund the business. This is what many would call private banking securitization, private placements, IPO. And we have what's normal saying fiat free money. So currency is not money. Yeah, it was saying here it is. They want you to think it's not, but deposits, credit, currency, it's all money. They're hoarding the real money and giving you the fake money. Well, the money is the medium of exchange, so this is just as real as anything. No accountability, offshore accounts. Yeah, so the scale of things that can occur when you're in this system here and not being monitored. You see, the more ignorant people are of how it really works, the easier it is to pull off these kind of schemes. Yeah, and it's a river has a current. It's got banks on both sides. Again, the deposits are what make the credits. Every deposit you make in there is the origin of the credits. Or I'm sorry, the credits are the origin of every deposit that's put in the bank, which is going to be funding the next credit. And the banks flow. Yeah. They never create the money to account for the interest. So if they call it in on the loans, there would be a shortage. But the whole point is not. They don't have to. The thing is that all that is just there to keep the deposits coming in for them. That's their scheme. All ashore, going ashore. The bitter end. Hope it's not frozen. Yeah. Yeah, freezing and stuff. But again, remember, this stuff's rather well contracted. Um, Not too sure. It's a lot of manipulation that goes on for sure. But of course, there's all kinds of fraud that happens in all different industries and all different things. And having the best administered system is the best, is the way it usually goes. E-transactions, in a way, yeah, but again, it really doesn't matter. You could say the same about paper. If you don't have the gold, why the paper? And the same with e-transactions. Yeah, metal. Well, thanks for hanging out for this whole time here. You get a great name there too. I think the metals are the ultimate when it comes to the money. They have been for over 5,000 years, and you could say metals like gold are an anchor of trust, whereas you couldn't say the same about this new money, so to speak. So, and what's normal? Thanks for coming on out and enjoying the live stream. I'm glad we were able to tag on this long here because I know this is a long topic. It's not the type of attention span usually suited for the YouTube audiences. So this has been really a great, yeah, I hope it's a good awakening here for everyone here. But moreover, it should be empowering to see that you're better than you think you are, that you can understand this stuff better than the top economists because what we see now is the top economists have really been following a flawed system because they couldn't have the simple discernment we're using right here to scrutinize objective evidence and empirical data to determine a valid model from an invalid one. Pretty simple to do, They make it sound like it's rocket surgery, and it's not. So, yeah, salute to you all for being out here. Please hit the like if you haven't already to make sure that the word gets out and we keep the message coming out and more people can become aware. And yes, indeed, I guess we found out that banks can create money out of nothing, as we've seen as a common theme repeated over and over. How the system is set up right now is perfect. People just have to learn and understand it in its totality, then do what they do. Well, and the system is going to have to keep changing and adjusting because there's always people trying to take advantage of systems. And it's kind of up to us, like you say here, to learn to understand it in its totality and do what you need to do. To do what you need to do. Do what they do to do what you need to do. Again, it's about getting the funding for the entrepreneur in the form of what we call working capital. So that's an important aspect there. So yeah, I'm glad you got that out of it there. And yeah, I think this is a good time to learn this stuff. I was happy to happen upon this guy here, Werner, and he has some more writings too. I'm going to look into some more of his stuff. This was seemed the most applicable to get on here tonight. So again, this has been almost 3 hours here. Appreciate you all being here, and I hope you all subscribe and hit the bell notification to be alerted next time we go on and have a good discussion like this and dive deep into some of these, say, essential topics for today. That being said, salute to you all for being here, and I'll see you all on the next one. Peace out.